Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. It's very enlightening to have all of you at 5 p.m. sharp. I really appreciate the time and the panelists too as well. Good evening. Welcome to the second edition of the All Things Talent webinar series by Naukri Hiring Suite. Naukri Hiring Suite offers a bouquet of new age solutions from brands like Naukri.com, IamJobs.com, Hirist.com, First Naukri, eHire, RMS to meet all your recruitment needs. My name is Prashant Sharma. I'm a member of the Naukri Hiring Suite marketing team, and we're all super happy to have you here on this Thursday evening, right on time. I can't stress that enough. It's a really wonderful thing to be on time. We sincerely hope that you're staying safe and taking all the necessary precautions in these pandemic times. I know things seem improved now, but let's continue to take precautions and drink water. I hope you guys have your water because it's going to be a lovely hour. The aim of the All Things Talent webinar series is to bring together the HR fraternity and promote an environment of mutual growth and inspire HR professionals to develop as leaders by learning from the experiences of industry stalwarts. It's a pleasure to have two esteemed panelists from the HR world today. And as much as they don't need any introductions, I'm going to try to give them a little bit of an introduction on my own in a bit. It's something that it gives me great joy to have them here for our second edition. The topic for today is one, which is of such great relevance, and it's been of great relevance for so long. I mean, I remember doing events 4 years ago, and the conversations were around employer branding. And today, as you can see, on my virtual background, we're here to unleash the marketeer in you, and we want to talk about employer branding. Just as I've said employer branding, the numbers crossed 200 as well. So to all 200 of you, thank you so much for joining us. Who are our panelists today? Right. So first, I'm going to start with Ms. Madhvi Lal. She's the Managing Director and Head HR for India at Deutsche Bank. Madhvi has about 3 decades of experience, and as a member of the executive committee at Deutsche Bank, she's responsible for shaping the people strategy in India and helping the employment brand of the organization. Prior to this, she was also a Managing Director at HR at Accenture. And she's worked with wonderful organizations like ABN AMRO, Colgate-Palmolive, and HP. It's amazing because someone who's worked with so many different organizations, and she's still excited about talking about all these topics, and she's very, very keen to share her insights as well. Thank you so much, Madhvi, for being here. Up next, we have Ms. Shilpa Vaid. She's the Head Human Resources at Prion and Cloudtail. Shilpa has over 2 decades of experience, and her experience varies from across consulting, insurance, retail, e-commerce, and off the top of my head, I know about 3 or 4 leadership positions that she's had. So I mean, when we talk about leadership and HR leadership, she is someone who's been there, done that. In addition to the country HR leader roles, she's also worked in global and Asia talent management leader roles with a specific to focus on designing and deployment talent management, performance management, and executive development programs across countries. So her experience across geographies also will come in handy for any of you who have questions with regards to that. It's a pleasure to have her here because not only has Shilpa, and so basically both panelists have also been on the cover of our All Things Talent magazine before. So I already know that you all are in for a wonderful 1 hour where conversations will flow, engaging conversations will flow, and that's where we are. And so I think we're all set. And with almost 250 of you, I'm extremely excited to have you all here. Over the next hour or so, please feel free to use the chat box if you have anything to share. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A box as well. We'll try to take whatever we can, but please do try to stay with us through the end, like you always do. And towards the end, I'll also have a feedback form for you to fill, but we'll get to that later, right? I'm going to start, this entire this conversation, because that's what this is, with something that's my own version of a rapid fire round. And I'm going to start with Shilpa. Shilpa, I'm going to ask you, talk to me about 2 shares each. One personal positive and one professional positive that's come your way through the last 18 months through the pandemic. Talk to us about one professional and one personal positive.
So I'll start with first thanking you, Prashant, for inviting me to be a part of this panel, and I'm very happy to be in Madhavi's company and on talking about something that's really an energizing topic. So thank you again. I also want to just tell our audience that I had some last minute technology glitches. So I'm on a phone. If there is some discomfort that you experience because of that, I apologize in advance. Now to your rapid fire, Prashant. I'll start with the positive first. It is embarrassing, but I will admit that before the pandemic and the lockdown, cooking was not a life skill that I had. And I learned how to cook, and I'm quite proud to announce that I'm a reasonably good cook now, making food that's palatable enough for my family to eat. So that's a personal positive. Professional positive, I think for me has been just reframing my thoughts on leadership, right? So I joined this new role virtually. I learned how to make connections with my team and stakeholders virtually. But more importantly, I think this last 18 months has sort of challenged a lot of assumptions that I held about being a leader, right? Do you always have all the answers? No, you don't. It's been about being vulnerable, not having answers, acknowledging what you don't know, and yet, trying to give confidence to the team. So yeah, professionally, I believe I've grown in this last 18 months.
Fantastic. And I think the skills in the kitchen are a common point for so many of us. I think so. Thank you so much for sharing that and being so honest. Madhvi, over to you. Same question. One personal positive, one professional positive that's come your way over the last 18 months.
Thanks, Prashant. And first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. And it's great to connect with Shilpa as well, although virtually. Firstly, I think I'd like to acknowledge that, these are all of us. I mean, when I say tough, it's doesn't even start to describe the situation. And especially people who've lost their jobs or, had to return to their hometown for safety reasons, or people grappling with taking care of family members and their children. And everyone's still living in this fear of. So it is really, one of those sad times that you're living in right now. But to come to your question, so on the personal front, I think what's happened over the last, I would say, 18 months or so, I think I found time over the weekends to read and learn more, which I really never really devoted that time. And I think there is these two incredible ladies in my building who are doing some very, NGO kind of work, but on a smaller scale. So I've kind of got involved with that over the weekend as well. So it's been for me a personal positive. On the professional front, there's so many things, but I think if I were to highlight one thing, I think I've just learned so much about virtual ways of working. We've been talking a lot about digitization and, becoming virtual. And if you look at discussions that happened 5 years ago, everybody was talking, people can work from anywhere, but it never really happened. So just experimenting with processes, virtual processes like online interviews, virtual onboarding of employees, and induction of people working from home. I think that for me was a huge, huge learning experience.
Fantastic. I think, again, very relatable in terms of, when you talk about the remote working aspect, I think these aspects are the same for everyone on this call as well, I think, when we think of it. Thank you so much. I think so, yeah. So I think we're all set now and we've heard from both panelists. I think it's also time to listen to the audience. So I think what we'll do is we'll set up the first audience poll now. And I think the panelists are welcome to vote as well for it. The poll should just be coming onto your screens right now. Yes. Have employer branding initiatives changed at your organizations post-pandemic? So it's a pretty simple question, so I'm not going to leave it on for too long. Right, I think we're good to see the answers after this. Let's see what the solutions are. The answer should, right, so 74% are saying yes, they've changed. So, it's a clear, that gives me confidence that we've chosen the right topic, because that means that 75% of you feel that there's something new that's going on at your organization with regards to employer branding. So thank you so much, everyone, for voting for that. And that brings me to my first question, and I'm going to ask it to both the panelists, and I'll start with Shilpa first. One of the big challenges that's spoken about is around culture when it comes to employer branding. And when we speak of culture, I think a question that came to us from a lot of people, with the registration was allocate new hires and subsequently build a brand to attract talent during these times. I think virtually a big challenge is because people think that culture is something that you show them physically and everything. So what are your thoughts on it, Shilpa?
Thank you, Prashant. So let me start maybe with the second part of your question first, which is on employer brand. And I'll spend a couple of minutes to give a little bit of, background to the way I look at employer brand, and I've seen it getting implemented across organizations that I've been a part of. So first and foremost, before you start communicating an employer brand to your target audience, what every organization needs to have is an EVP, right? Which is your employee value proposition. And for those of you, who might not be familiar with this, in my mind, an EVP is basically a set of unique attributes about your organization that are compelling to your target audience, right? And when I say unique means that they have to be distinctive about your organization. And when I say compelling, they have to be relevant, right, to your target audience to attract them into your organization. Now, the topic of this panel discussion, Prashant, is about unleashing the marketer in you, right? And to do an EVP exercise is nothing different from running a marketing campaign. You first start with your target audience. What are the cohorts? If you're, for example, I worked in an organization where we would hire fashion design students. So that becomes a target audience that you go after. There are organizations that hire from reputed premier business school campuses, right? That becomes your target audience. Your internal employee base becomes your target audience, right? You then understand what they put a premium on, and what is their perception of your offerings as an organization. You do that through perception surveys. You can do those perception surveys on campuses. You can do focus group discussions internally within the organization. And then, as a third step, you essentially start articulating your EVP as an organization, which means a set of attributes, like I said, which are unique to you, which are compelling and relevant. And this runs just like a marketing campaign. For each attribute, you have to find proof points, right? Which is, if you say that we as an employer offer the world-class learning solutions, then what are those proof points that substantiate that, right? Do you have a culture of learning? Do you have a best-in-class LMS? Do you provide employees opportunities to reskill them? And once you've identified the EVP, right, you socialize it internally and then bring it to life through your employer branding campaign. And in my mind, that's typically the process that you would follow, right, to build and communicate an employer brand. Their choice made, and in this time, right, there are certain things that we need to keep in mind. There are, employees worldwide, right? Talent worldwide is looking for flexibility, customization, personalization. Are you articulating that well as a part of your story? If you're trying to attract freelance and assignment-based workers, again, are you able to say what is that you offer that makes sense for them as a target audience? So that was my piece around employer branding. Maybe I'll let Madhavi answer the part on culture, and if there's anything else that I want to add, and of course, anything that she wants to add here.
So before I bring in Madhavi, I think, like you shared, you basically collated a lot of my marketing data, like I used to learn in college. So I think wonderful, because I think that's the topic, isn't it? Unleashing the marketer in you. So thank you so much for sharing that, Madhavi. I'd like to bring you in to talk about.
In fact, culture. I was thinking as Shilpa was speaking, I said Shilpa's articulated the whole employer piece so beautifully. What is employer brand? It is about how people feel the organization. What are the experiences that they go through? How do they? How is the feeling that they interact with the organization? Right. That's what employer brand is. So I'll come to the culture question, and I think it's a very good question. And I have to say there is no one magic bullet answer to this question, because cultures, as we know, takes years to build. It needs a lot of effort. So I'll talk a little bit about Deutsche Bank, and I'll talk about it in the context of the. I think we just started the journey, of this virtual environment, working in the virtual environment. We're learning as we go. So I'm going to give you an example. When the pandemic started, like March last year, we found ourselves asking the question, should we delay the joining dates of people? Suddenly lockdown came through, and we said, should we really onboard them? Because we never really onboarded people virtually. People come into the office, they sign forms, etc., etc. And we took the call not to delay the joining dates. And the reason was very simple. We said, somebody is left an organization to join us, and if we delay the joining date, they will lose the income. So our sort of call on not delaying the joining date was based on that, and something we stood for it, right? And of course, as we now know, that decision was right, because the pandemic has just been going on and on. We would have really, have had to anyway eventually onboard people virtually. And once that was done, once the decision that we are going to onboard people virtually, the team really then started discussing ways to get this whole thing streamlined, getting laptops to people, getting the forms filled, and those days there was complete lockdown. So how do you get forms filled digitally and, get those sort of recorded? And over the last 1 year, actually, we've been continuously improving our processes. In a very simple sort of, example. So when we did a feedback with our new joiners, they said, we've never really seen the Deutsche Bank office. We don't know what office looks like. We've been working from home. So there was this team of people who actually came up with the idea, and they shot a video of all our premises, through the corporate services team. And that was played for all the new joiners, in a very interesting format. So that, if you had joined here, this is where you would have said, this is what the cafeteria looks like. So, and we got some amazing feedback. So I think what's happened is that as with employer brand and as the culture, you've got to constantly look at, how you're going to sort of have people feel that or live that really. And what we then decided was we will continue all our engagement initiatives virtually. So we've got something called DB's Got Superstar, which is really where people showcase their talent in singing, music, and art. And we said, let's do that virtually. We didn't stop the initiative. So, so I think that's what got people to, really sort of feel the organization. And of course, I feel that one of the challenges that we're still going to have to live with is to figure out how the vision and the mission and the brand is going to be felt by employees sitting in, not sitting in the office. And how do you build that connected culture, and it does sound like a challenge, but I think our experience has been that you can make it happen. It just needs a lot more effort, a lot more engagement, because, the values and beliefs of the organization are going to be the same, right? And if you have to impact and have people feel the employer brand, it is about the experiences you make people go through. But that's my thought, really, Shilpa. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic close to my heart, Prashant, so I'll take a liberty to talk for maybe 30 seconds, right? As a part of an organization that puts a huge premium on culture, and I know most organizations do. So we've taken a lot of actions, right, in terms of how do we assimilate our new hires who are joining virtually. So, obviously you run them through training programs on our leadership behaviors, right? They get feedback on that. We have an employee sentiment tracking tool where we see what are the culture scores for new hires and especially new managers. But most importantly, I think what we've grappled with is our people, especially the new hires who've been onboarded virtually, do they have an inconsistent interpretation of our culture than those who've been in the organization for a longer time, right? And the reason for that is there are a lot of intangible things that you experience in office, right? Just from the way the layout is done to how people interact with each other, to even the explicit signals they get from their leaders, right? About culture. And those explicit signals become implicit when you're working virtually. And that's something, not that I'm saying that we have a soul for, but it's something that we're thinking about very deeply, because when we go to the new normal, I have stopped saying, I should stop saying new normal, but maybe when we go to the next normal and there's a hybrid working environment, that's something that leaders and organizations need to think very deeply about. How do you ensure that people who are working remotely or on site have the same understanding and interpretation of an organization's culture?
Fantastic. So I think you're talking about the consistency in what everyone sort of sees and feels, right? I think wonderful. Yeah. I think from the two of you, I'm certain that I think we've got so much juice there. And I think for me, the favorite aspect of of the initiatives you both spoke about as well is that they aren't necessarily linked to massive budgets. Like to do a photo shoot of your office and share that video, it doesn't take that much. So I think all of these aspects are very doable for all of you as well. Everyone listening and lots of questions and chat that's coming in. I will try to take all of that. And my next question is, in fact, to Shilpa. And the reason why this question makes sense right now is because a lot of you are actually asking this question as well. Shilpa, I'm going to ask you to be a little empathetic right now and put on the hat of a smaller organization leader, like an up and coming organization, a startup, or if not a startup, even a smaller organization entering a new setting. How do you create a branding experience or a recruitment experience for candidates and for the external audience? How do you do that? Try to keep it crisp, because we've got a lot of questions coming in as well.
So Prashant, here again, I believe the magic is in the fundamentals. Your candidate is your customer. Get your fundamentals right? When they look at your LinkedIn page and website, how easy is it for them to find the jobs they're looking for? Are your job descriptions inclusive? When they become a formal applicant, right? How long are they made to wait for interviews? How do the interviewers interface with them? What messaging of the culture do they leave behind? How is the recruiter engaging, right? All of this, again, since you're a marketeer, right? Marketeers have been creating customer journeys for a long time, and we don't do that in HR. You have to create a customer journey for your candidate and identify the moments that matter. Identify what is broken and address them. The two things that I would ask everyone to think about is simple thing, right? Small organization, budget or no budget. Can you do a candidate experience survey and figure out what is broken? And secondly, go back and look at your metrics. Most of our metrics are so inward focused. We track SLAs, TATs, how we've closed positions. We don't track how much time a candidate spent from the time he was first contacted to when he made an offer, right? What you track shows you what the organization puts a premium on. And that, I hope I was crisper.
Absolutely. And so again, these are very simple things that, I think we miss these simple things in our daily work and everything. I think the amount of time taken to close a position, those conversations, how humane they are. And I'm seeing a lot of questions coming up. Just to answer one question, so I think Priya's asking, how do we communicate our increment to our employees? In my experience, if you communicate an increment to anyone, they'll be happy. So don't worry. I mean, you can try to do that in any way possible, right? I'm going to go to my next question, and that's going to be to Madhvi. Madhvi, this question again, came to us, and these are paraphrase questions, but you can assume that about 10-15 people asked us these questions. How can an established MNC, but a new entrant, into the Indian market, carve out a niche amongst the big players? And I guess you're the right person to ask this, because you're competing in a market with so many folks from in the BFSI sector, and you're still one of the great places to work and everything. So how do you think if you could put that hat on, how does an MNC entering the Indian market, how do they sort of work on carving a niche for themselves?
If I got your question right, it's already an established MNC, so people know it, right? So I would think the first step would be to assess the current brand awareness of this particular MNC in the country, and so get that sense first, to assess where we are currently. And I think coupled with what the organization wants to do, what the organization's strategic objectives are, you could actually identify sort of key focus areas. And like Shilpa said, employer brand is not about being everything to everyone. It is about really focused, what is it that you want the person to feel and experience, right? So identify the key focus areas. And the next will be to develop a plan which would really cover how the employer brand will become visible, will come live. And I want to again just say that it's not always about advertising. People tend to think employer brand is advertising. It is not just the advertising. You could advertise all you want, but if you don't live those that brand statement, that's not brand building really. So I think once you identify the key focus areas, then the internal ways of working, the employee experience, the processes all need to reflect that particular brand that you want to live. But for an established MNC, I guess it would be slightly easier than a startup, because somebody asked about a startup, because the MNC already has some brand awareness globally. So a lot can be leveraged off that. But fine tune it to India.
So you're talking about using that foundation, that keeping track of that, and then trying to build a new strategy on it, right? Fantastic. I think again, so we've we're talking about things that you may have already heard, but I'm saying the fact that these things are very crucial to you still, irrespective of your, the remaining variables of your strategy, tells you that the foundations and fundamentals have to be strong. Right. I think this is the right time because I'm seeing a lot of questions. Don't worry, I'm going to try to take them and I'll try to merge them together and I'm going to put them to the panelists. But I think this is the right time to use a second poll because we've been talking a lot about the external, aspects. I think one aspect of employer branding that does get ignored is the internal stakeholders. I mean, how do we have strategies for our internal stakeholders? So I think we'll have a poll coming up very, very shortly. Yes. So do you have specific employer branding initiatives for internal employees and internal targets? Yes, no, or maybe the program is in the works. Please feel free to answer. I think so. We've got more than 300, 320 plus folks who are on this call. I'm expecting a wide variety of answers. Let's see. I hope the answer is yes for everyone, but let's see what we get. Right. So I think now we can take a look at the results quickly. Should be coming up on your screens. All right. 43% say no. Wow. So I didn't expect that because I think I think putting this poll there and these questions that are coming up have been vindicated because I guess we need to talk about this now, right? And my next question is to the both of you, and I'm going to keep it very simple. What can you suggest in terms of best practices or recommendations? When you're trying to do employer branding for your internal stakeholders, I'd request Madhvi to start, and Shilpa and me will go on mute in the meantime.
Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, employees and customers are actually the best brand ambassadors. So whatever the employer value proposition is, it needs to be felt by the existing employees as well. So I think it is very important to look at employer branding for internal customers as well. And it has to be a focus area. I'll give you a simple example. Like we have our employee referral policy where, employee refers candidates to the organization. If we have not built our brand with our internal customers, how are we going to get the best talent in the market, right?
Fantastic. I think I'll bring in Shilpa here. And, I think she's talking of employee advocacy. Shilpa, what do you have to add on that? And I mean, so I'm seeing Bhavin also ask a similar question in the chat. How do we brand to the internal teams and everything? So Shilpa, please take it forward.
So when you define an EVP, Prashant, there is an external audience. Purpose is also to foster commitment, foster pride, and drive engagement. And hence, 2-3 things that come to my mind, right? One is co-create your employee experience with your internal employees, right? So that will help you establish whether it's authentic over aspirational, whether what you say are unique about your organization actually resonates with your current employees, right? And secondly, to the point that Madhavi was making, right? Use them as brand ambassadors. In fact, if you're in the journey of articulating your EVP, you should do your test run with your internal employees first to get real-time feedback on the authenticity of your proposition.
Great. I think again, so like she said, I think authenticity, transparency in your strategy will only come if you involve your internal stakeholders, right? So I think again, fair points there from the both of you. I'm going to ask the next question, and the next question is, I think I'd love to hear from both of you on it. I know I initially said that it'll be targeted towards one of you, but I'd love both of you to sum up it, sum this aspect up. How are organizations utilizing employer branding strategies to employ women career breaks? And do the comeback programs actually help? I'm sure this question is actually coming from someone contemplating whether they want to do that or not. So first, I think Shilpa, you can go, and then Madhvi can go next.
So if I heard and understood the question correctly, Prashant, I mean, how do you leverage employer branding for attracting women talent, right? And whether the comeback programs really... So I'm going to probably say something a little controversial here, which is, they work if you do it with the right intentions, right? They work if you are doing it to tap into a larger talent base. They work if you truly value diversity, not just of gender, but thought, background, experiences. I would say that first and foremost, companies that are evaluating employee comeback, comeback programs for women employees should work harder at retaining their current women employees, stay in touch with the ones that they've lost, keep them engaged. And then if you really want to have a comeback program, you can brand it, but get some prerequisites right? Do you have the benefits that are required, right? Flexible working, childcare support. Most importantly, will you pay them fairly, right? Will you give them career progression opportunities? Will you listen without assumptions? And then branding works again if you can deliver on your promise.
Wonderful. I think you said some wonderful things in a slightly less controversial manner. So don't worry, that wasn't controversial at all. It was only fair. Madhvi, your take on it.
I'm going to actually talk about something that many companies have this return to work program, right? So I have a fabulous diversity team that's working on something like this. And they've come up with a new idea, which we're launching shortly, which is called Resume Your Resume. Now, why do we have something it's branded like that? And basically what we are saying is that one is, I agree with Shilpa, first, if you really want to do it, you can do it. But I think one thing we found was when you have people who have taken breaks and want to come back, there's a learning gap sometimes. So what we have now said is that this Resume Your Resume program will be something that people who want to restart their careers, they come in and do a 12-week paid program with us, which basically is like it's a full-time role. They come in and receive on-the-job training. They learn, they train. There's a mentor attached to them. And once they finish the 12 weeks, depending on their interest and how they've formed and what they want to do, we absorb them into full-time roles. So this is something I want to just talk about, because there are ways to do these things. And I must say that while obviously this is targeted at women, but we're also inclusive with men, women, any gender, most welcome, because there are also men who take career breaks. So it is about people who've taken the break and want to come back. But we feel the branding will be important, but also delivering on what you've set out to do is also important.
Sure, it sounds wonderful, Madhavi. Sorry, Prashant, for interrupting you, but I have to acknowledge that it sounds wonderful.
We're experimenting. Credit to the university team, honestly, on this one.
Fantastic. I think again, even with regards to the diversity initiatives at the organization, what Madhvi just spoke about, try to see the piece of the pudding for you guys, like because one size never fits all. All of these solutions that are being offered by both panelists, we're not encouraging you to go and immediately start executing at your organization, but try to find your fit, try to customize it as per your wishes. And I think one very key aspect that I'd like to highlight again, a lot of the things that they're talking about aren't dependent on money. They aren't dependent massively on your budgets. Of course, there's a certain foundation there, but it's not as if you take away the budget, it doesn't happen. These initiatives are much more than that. So I think that's a wonderful thing, that's there. I'm actually going to now start taking some questions from the audiences, and I've got a few questions that I've already thought of taking. One question that's come from a few people, and I'm going to ask this to Shilpa, and I'm going to ask Shilpa to take it. Shilpa, I believe the biggest challenge that's coming, or the attendees of this call are facing, is in that journey from especially in the current scenario where everyone's working from home and all of this is happening, that journey from finalizing the person and getting them onboarded. I think it's the oldest issue that recruiters have always had. But if you were to offer advice, how would you keep that person engaged, or anything that you've seen in your own experience that's worked wonders? What would that be?
So again, Prashant, I'm going to go back to the point I was making about even the candidates have a journey with us as an organization and their customers. The journey doesn't end after you make the offer, right? It doesn't end actually for a long time. Hopefully they stay with the organization. But in that phase between offer acceptance and them getting onboarded, a few things that I've seen work is, obviously from the recruitment team and the hiring manager. In one of the organizations that I worked with, we had a significant issue with offer dropouts, and we came up with this app called 1% Delta, which was developed by a partner, and it would send out little snippets about the organization to the candidates who'd accepted offers. It would have leader videos, it would have quizzes, it would talk about our values, so that people felt excited and energized about the organization that they were joining and already started developing a connection. Did it work entirely? No. Did our offer dropouts reduce? Yes. That's one thing potentially that you can, folks on the call can explore.
Great. I think, again, something that's easier to sort of manage and look at, and something that Shilpa had shared much earlier was trying to keep that engagement level, understand where they are in that cycle, right? So I think that's, again, something wonderful. And as I can see from the chat box, I think onboarding is something that's been a big challenge, right? And I think Madhvi also spoke about it in her, within her intro. So I'm going to ask you about that, Madhvi. And this question is coming from on the basis of onboarding. How do you do that? Because while candidates are being onboarded, they're also in the shop window looking for a higher offer using your offer letter, right? I think this is another thing that a lot of people are still talking about, because they believe that the longer the onboarding process, sometimes you lose out on a lot of candidates doing the same, because they're not really coming to the office anymore, right? Are they? So what are your thoughts on that? How does one improve that? Shilpa, I just request you to sort of go on mute because the voice echoes something. That's all.
I have actually a different perspective on this, Prashant. So obviously when you're interviewing, see, it's a candidate market. Today as a candidate, if I'm getting a 20%, 25% hike from somebody else, I will go there, right? Most to accept that there will be drop-offs. Now, how do you address that issue is when you're in the conversation with the employee, with the candidate, you need to clarify, what is it they're looking for, and is it matching what you have to offer. Faster onboarding definitely helps, but what makes you certain that once the person is onboarded, they won't leave? Somebody can still join you and leave, right? So I would say that is, somebody asked the question, how to convince the business about dropouts. I would say it's better the person dropped off before joining us than the person joining us, going through the training and then leaving us. So I would say my advice would be just build the backup. Always keep backup candidates, especially for junior levels, and that's more or less easily available. Keep that backup, factor in the drop-offs, in your hiring process as well.
Great. I think, again, so I mean, being a little forthright in terms of your planning and accounting for a lot of these drop-offs is I think definitely a way to go. Thank you. I think we've also got another answer from Apra Bhatt on what you can do. So boarding engagement, she's talking about fireside chats, involve company, involve them with the company events, and manager. I think that's a great suggestion. I think that's something that works for a lot of people. My next question, and it's going to, because I've seen that question come
from. Can I just add one more thing on the onboarding? When the person is onboarded, we've got something called a buddy system where because see, when you're, like I think Shilpa mentioned, when you're in the office, it's easy, you walk across, you talk, okay, you're new, here is this person. Virtually now it's become a little difficult to do that. So there should be somebody the person can reach out to understand the organization, understand some of the workings. It always cannot be your line manager. So somebody the person can just call saying, listen, I have this, who do you think I should contact? I have this problem, or I want to do this. So I think those things you can probably do in the virtual world. Sorry, I just interrupted you.
No problem. Thank you so much. I mean, I completely understand. And right, so the buddy program is another initiative that you can look at. One more thing that I actually experienced at and because I've been doing these webinars and these events for a really long time, I remember someone talking about an initiative where whenever someone new joined, they would actually take a picture of the desk where this person would be sitting, who they would be reporting to, surround that desk with the team, take a picture, send it to their home, where their family would actually also be a part of it. So I'm saying at that point, it sort of adds a slight emotional connect. I'm not saying it will always work, but I think that's another thing that's very easy to do. Right? So I think that's something that you can look at. You can just courier, something like that to a prospective joiner. So I think that's something that's there. One question that I'm going to actually put to the both of you, Shilpa, because I've seen this question. I think Sindhu has asked this question, and I think two more people asked this question. Talk about the correlation between the company brand, the marketing brand that that's already existing. Like a lot of us may actually know FMCG brands, but a lot of people may not know B2B brands. So I mean that might be a struggle for candidates. So how do you strike that balance, and how important is the company brand with regards to the correlation with the employer brand? How well do those strategies have to be aligned?
I will take a shot at that, Prashant. For the employer brand to be compelling, it has to be aligned to your corporate brand. I'll give you an example of the organization that I worked with earlier, which was fashions. We were into fashion. That's where you and I met. So the EVP, and if you go to the Urban Fashions website, you will see there was fashioning possibilities, right? We chose it purposefully because it was aligned with, the company's purpose of, dressing the new Indian, right? And therefore that alignment and congruency in the message definitely helps. If it's a B2B brand, like you were asking, and it's difficult sometimes for people to associate with it, I would suggest that go back and think about deeply the company purpose. And then your EVP and the core message of your EVP has to be around that. And maybe I'll give Madhvi a chance to weigh in.
I agree with you, Shilpa. It has to be aligned. So for us, it's, the company's sort of brand is creating positive impact, and everything we do in our HR processes is about creating positive impact. We have to sort of think about, is this going to create a positive impact for the employee? So it has to be aligned, otherwise it won't work. There'll be sort of people will otherwise.
Great. Okay, so one question that I've just got from Arshad is, and I think this is a question that if you're not asking, you probably should be asking, or you should be paying attention to this answer. Great thoughts on employer branding. I want to understand, how do you measure employer branding? Now we're talking about metrics. I think obviously now everyone has to present a business case for everything, ROI, all of these aspects have to be considered. So I'd like a take from both of you, because eventually the person's going to go to the hiring manager, or they're going to go to their boss and they say, why did we do this? What did we gain out of this? That question will always come. So how do you measure the impact of your employer branding? And I think, Madhvi, you can go first.
I would say it is the ability to attract the talent and retain them. So I think you should look at, what your hiring numbers are. What are the number of dropouts, offered dropouts? That's a good sort of, benchmark. What is your attrition levels? Are you losing your high performers? Those are, I think, would be the direct impact of employer branding and the proposition that you're creating for the as an organization. And I'll give you an example, which I joined the Deutsche Bank 6.5 years ago. And for me, the first year, I was very intrigued that the number of people who had left the bank and wanted to come back was huge. I have never seen that kind of stuff. And, people would call me up and say, listen, I've left the bank, but I want to come back, and I'm okay to come back in the same corp I left at. And we do have a lot of people joining back. And that talks about the brand the bank has built over the years, even before I joined. So I think that's what, to my mind, those are the measures of employer branding.
So just to add on to that, Prashant, if you're socializing your brand on social media, I said social twice, right? The number of followers you have on your LinkedIn page, are they growing organically, right? If your target audience is your campus hires, what is your positioning on those campus, right? Again, the offer dropouts for those campuses. You can do brand perception surveys on campuses, through other agencies. There are tons of different metrics to track, but again, focus on the target audience, and then, and the mediums or channels of communication, and then build out your metrics accordingly.
Great. So another question that's, been coming has been around initiatives for smaller size company. I think we've already taken that. We've spoken about startups. Okay. So I think let's talk about startups. All right. So I think startups from a smaller size organization, if they're a lot of times organizations are competing for the same talent, right? But startups often have certain things that they can offer that MNCs can't offer, like autonomy and things like that. Shilpa, would you like to talk a little bit about the advantages and how startups can maybe position themselves better?
Since I'm doing this on the phone, you have to bear with me. I know it compromises on the panel attendee experience. And I know I will end up repeating myself, Prashant, but it boils down to authenticity and being able to substantiate what you put out there as what is unique about your organization, what is differentiated, right? So in one of my previous organizations, one of the things that we wanted to sell was that we don't put you in a box, which means that you're not defined by your role description. You're defined by what you want to do. And therefore, how do you kind of translate, right, a culture of no boundaries, and then using employee testimonials to communicate that. My advice to startups and actually large companies alike would be to be very, very clear about what's distinctive, communicate that consistently, make sure that you have proof points that support it, and there's really no other, frills above and beyond that.
Great. I think, Madhi, would you like to add anything on that? All right, perfect. I actually have another question for Madhi, and I'm going to. It's nice that I've taken a lot of audience questions. I can go back to one question that I already had. So I'm going to pose it to Madhi. I think and we saw that with the first poll we did, right, where we saw that a lot of organizations are actually going through a change in their initiatives. My question to you is, and in fact, our last webinar was also one which was on flexibility at the workplace and is it a norm now and things like that. What is the most important aspect during the ongoing COVID crisis? Is it talent safety? Is it work from home flexibility? I mean, how necessary is for us to consider COVID and the pandemic as a key element of our employer branding strategies moving forward?
So I first of all love the word talent safety. I really like that word, and I'm going to use it. So I think we have to factor in the pandemic because it's not over as yet. And from whatever, I'm not an expert, from whatever the experts say, this is going to continue for a while. So we, of course, are going to be launching something called a hybrid model once, things go back to a little bit of normal. I won't say they'll be fully normal. So to my mind, I think organizations will have to continue this whole agile execution, building resilience into their processes and flexibility in the work arrangements if they really want to stay competitive, And I think we've already done about 18 months of this. It's going to be a little while more before, and nobody can predict that, right? Today, nobody can predict when we're going to get back to our pre-COVID times. So I think the whole focus will have to be to either get talent or train talent, digital, emotional, and social skills. And to my mind, coping with the pandemic and helping staff cope with the crisis has to continue to be a priority. I mean, there's already talk of wave 3. I hope wave 3 never happens, but it is going to be crucial to manage through this whole crisis. And so what we really think is that we in HR, in talent acquisition, need to create a sort of a robust, future-ready workforce, which can really adapt and identify future trends. And it's not easy. I mean, these are good words to say, but it's not easy really, And I think we need to equip our line managers and leaders to lead remote teams, more and more, to become more and more effective in managing the virtual teams. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so talking about, focus on a better management for virtual teams, I think that's a key aspect, and I think that will play an important part in all our, employer branding strategies. I'm seeing a lot of questions still come in. Some of them have already been answered. I'm sorry if you missed that answer. If you ducked out of the webinar and came back, I'm sorry if you missed that answer. But yeah, I think, yes, so is employer branding and culture synonymous? I think Shilpa has spoken about this. Madhi has spoken, about this aspect quite a bit. So yes, I think we've already taken that. I think, all right, remote locations, right? So so Sindhu is talking about, she's seen many team members who had joined through the pandemic, and now that, they're easing the process of all of this. And I think now they're welcoming folks back to work. What branding strategies or what recruitment strategies or what onboarding, would you do a repeat of the onboarding and things like that? Shilpa, I'm going to pose this question to you.
Prashant, just so that I'm clear that I understood the question correctly, you're saying that organizations are bringing employees back to office, and what should their priority be? Or
so effectively, if I've been hired, during a pandemic, I haven't had like a full onboarding experience, physical. And what's happening now is that people now that they're being told to come back to office in a different, they're now dropping out. They're either saying that we don't want to join, or we want to continue working remotely, or we'll have to look for a new job, things like that. So how do you And I'm assuming that the management hasn't agreed to a hybrid model. So, so how would you balance this situation?
So that's honestly a tough place to be in. Most organizations have had learnings, right, from this pandemic that they will carry forward, whether it's about hybrid working, whether it's about being more intentional in, building an inclusive culture, whether it's about managing virtual teams. But, if that is the specific situation, the person who's posed the question is dealing with, Prashant, then I don't see a solve unless the manager is, the organization has agreed to location agnostic roles or decided to look at its workforce composition. But I don't know if Madhavi has anything different to add. It's a tricky place to be in.
I was just saying that if you're in an organization that knows for sure that you're not going to be able to work flexibly, and there are industries like that where you really can't have flexible work arrangements, I think it'll be very important for you in your recruitment process to tell the person who's joining that while right now you're going to be working in the city, but ultimately you have to come to this base location. I know you will still have dropouts, but at least you have to be honest and upfront in the process.
Again, I think it comes back to that one word, transparency, and the second word, which is authenticity. You've got to keep them keep them engaged. One more question.
And you have to understand. I talked about this in the introduction. I think people are going through this fear of pandemic. There is a fear, right? People don't want to fall sick. So sometimes I do empathize with people who don't want to relocate. But you, as an organization, you've got to decide what is it that you need. Your industry needs people in the office, then you have to work through that. Yeah.
Sometimes there isn't an option available. So I think that there isn't much that the management can also do about that. So I think it's important to understand that. Right. So I think one more question that I'd like to ask Madhavi is, and Shilpa, please feel free to chime in as well, but we'll keep it crisp, right? This one. I'm going to talk to you about the high performance individuals. Like, do we need a separate strategy for retaining our high performance individuals, folks who have been killing it every year? If they're top of the charts when it comes to all the awards that you have. Do we need a separate strategy to retain these mid to senior level employees?
Absolutely. So we do have something called a high performance and high potential kind of identification, and they are treated if their bonuses are higher, their comp differentials are higher, etc. So if you don't do that, you lose them. But I think my only thing I want to caveat that with is that while you take care of your high performers and high potentials, there is a bunch of people who make the organization run. You have to take care of them as well.
Shilpa, I'm going to ask you to chime in a little bit on the same.
So agree with what Madhavi is saying, Prashant. You need a differentiated proposition for high performers in your organization. The only thing that I'd probably add is just don't think about high performers. Start first by thinking about which are the roles that are most important to your organization and whether you have the best talent in their roles if your intent is to ring fence the organization.
Right. I think a deeper involvement as to what role is key, and getting the top talent in those positions is a much better process as well. Great. I think so. I would each of you, if I was to ask you to talk about one best practice, your favorite best practice with regards to employer branding. I know we've spent so much time talking about so many best practices employable. You can actually repeat as well. You can name the best practice again if you want. If to each of you, one favorite best practice, current organization, previous organization, if you'd like to share. Shilpa, go first.
Co-create with your employees. You don't know everything.
Right. Madhavi, I'm going to bring you.
I think focus on employee experience always. Whenever you're drafting something, think about how are they going to feel? How is that going to impact the employee or the candidate?
Fantastic. I think with that, and I'm not going to sort of unnecessarily spend 1 or 2 minutes extra. If we're done on time, we'll try our best to get done on time. What a wonderful hour or so that we've had. Thank you so much to both panelists for doing this with us. I hope it's been worth your time. We've had so many questions, so many comments, in the chat window. They're still coming, and I assure you try to connect with them offline or send us your questions. We'll try to share it with them as well. And to all the attendees, please, on your way out, ensure you fill the feedback form, because if you do the feedback form, we'll come back even better. And we're going to try our best to top this panel but I'm telling you, these two have done so well. Thank you so much to both the panelists. It's been such a pleasure. Any closing comments from the both of you?
Love the questions and the interaction with the attendees have. I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for having us, Prashant. I enjoyed it as well. It's makes you reflect and think.
Fantastic. I think, like we said, it's a topic we've all known for so long, but it's still relevant. We're still here to talk about it, and we'll be back next month with another topic. With that, I bring to an end a wonderful hour of insights and experiences. Thank you to the panelists, attendees for joining us, being on time. Remember to do the feedback form. I assure you, feedback. From what I've learned from the panelists today, feedback is key as a marketer. So I'm going to need you guys to fill the market, to help me as well. And once again, a massive thanks to everyone. We hope you, your families, your loved ones are all safe and taking necessary precautions. Madhvi said, in a first statement that it's still not over. We're still a lot of us have dealt with a lot of unfortunate scenarios. Let's stay positive. Let's try to do our best. And I think we had more than 300 through the call. Thank you so much and wish you all the best. See you guys next time.